Alright, what's up guys? So this video, as I'm sure you can tell, it's going to be tips on how to get better at PvP, whether this is for new players or players who have already played the game and they're just not really that comfortable with it yet. I'm going to try to give you guys some advice from, that I use, and I think that's maybe not necessarily super obvious. Like, if you think about it, it becomes obvious, but it's not something you think about in the moment during a fight. And if you don't know, I have made a video like this before. It's probably been over a month ago. And some of the things I've talked about in this video, I will have talked about before in that video, and I will probably not go as in-depth. So if I talk about some things and you're like, you want to know more, like, for example, positioning. Positioning is something I talk about for probably like 10 minutes in the other video. So if you want to know more of that, go check that video. Just go back and check my old videos. Not that hard to find. I don't have that many. But with that being said, let me move on to this video and what I'm actually going to talk about. I think the first thing I'm going to discuss is picking your fights. And what that means is you never want to fight when you're not like ready for the fight. Obviously, there are going to be times when you have no choice. However, if you can take most of your fights on terms that you want, it will be much, much better for you. What does this mean? Simply, let's say, you're playing Goblin Caves, like you're a solo player, so you're playing Goblin Caves. You just pulled like 2 goblins, and then someone runs at you, and now you're dealing with 2 goblins and that person. You already hit them both, so they're aggroed on you. They won't aggro to him, and now you have to fight both of them, and you're fighting the person. Obviously, you're at a giant disadvantage, especially if one of them's like ranged or something, so because then they can shoot you while the other person's trying to melee you, or you're getting shot by both people, that type of thing. So you always want to be in a position where at least you can take a neutral fight. You might not necessarily have an advantage, but you won't be at a disadvantage either. And that's one of the biggest points is you want your fights to at least be even, because then you have, you're not the best chance at winning, but they don't have a better chance at winning the fight than you do. And that, like I said, ties a bit into positioning, so I'm going to talk about positioning a bit more. But other than that, there are just some fights you don't want to take. For example, let's say someone is significantly overgeared than you. You're not ready, like, they're like buffed up, they have protection potion popped, you're not full health. All of those go into that. Like, you don't want to fight when you are not ready for a fight. If you do, it is just not going to be that good for you. Alright, on to the next thing is consumable and skill usage. So, just a forewarning, I think these tips are going to apply to pretty much everything. These can apply to solos, duos, trios. I have a background in trios. I don't really play solos or duos that much, so for the most part, it's hard to really give you specific tips for those. I mean, I can maybe try, but honestly, I'll probably forget. So, like I said, most of this is going to be very general knowledge, but I do think it'll help you regardless of what you play. And one more thing is I'm a fighter player. If you don't know, I play fighter. That is my class. So most of the things I say, well, I said they will be general. Some of them will have a background from a fighter player's point of view, right? So that's just not really a whole lot I can do about that. That's just how I experience the game. It's how I'm best at teaching the game, right? Okay, so consumable and skill usage. In short, literally, consumable usage is just it's. I mean, this is what it says it is. Using them at the right time and effectively. There's a lot of people that, let's say you go into a fight, they'll forget to use protection potions. So they're so ready for a fight and they feel like it's such a good chance, they won't use a protection potion. And then, you might end up losing the fight, or even if you win it in a way that is, you're almost dead and you die to a third party. And if you use those consumables, maybe that wouldn't have happened. Because a protection potion can pretty much nullify an entire hit from pretty much any class, or at least make it so, you only take like half the damage of that hit, which is a giant benefit to you. Because them having to take, let's say you're running at someone and you have the protection potion and they don't, that is an extra hit they have to go through to kill you compared to yours. So if you guys do equal amounts of damage and equal amounts of time, which, isn't always going to happen, but just for the sake of this, so assume you're like two similarly geared people, then they have to hit you an extra time than you have to hit them to win the fight, right? So, and this works for protection potions. Something else that I think is very, very important here that a lot of players haven't started utilizing yet is an invisibility potions. That is something that can just be fantastic. That can turn a losing matchup into a winning one incredibly easy, like super, super easy. For example, let's say you're a fighter player. Fighter players have bad matchups into wizards or warlocks. Let's say, there's one on the other side of a door. They know you're there. You back off a little bit, drink an invis pot around a corner, and then they like they push through looking for you, or even in a melee matchup, like the other another fighter or barbarian pushes through looking for you, they don't see you, you pop out of invis, you get the advantage on them in damage because you start hitting them before they even know you're there. And this is something that works solos, duos, trios. I think it works especially well in trios because then you have teammates that can bait for you, the same way they would for a rogue. The enemies see you, they start like trying to chase after, pop out from behind them, eliminate a squishy, cleric, whatever it may be. This is fantastic. I've won many fights just off this alone. I've won fights where I was significantly undergeared just because of this. Prime example would be there was a fight where we fought full gold team, gold wizard, gold ranger, gold rogue, all three full gold, and we were playing on like not even like I mean they were like okay kits, but they were like budget kits for the most part, right? Like I was using a halberd, and so I mean I never use a halberd because I don't think it's that good. But I invis potted around a corner, they pushed around the corner, I got a double kill on the ranger and the wizard almost instantly, and we won the fight because of it. Got all the gear, great run. But that's just one example of how invis pods can just be fantastic. And then on top of that, you have offensive utility items, like Molotovs, explosive bottles, the oil lanterns that explode. All of those can be really good. They're really good for stopping pushes. Let's say, you have somebody trying to haste invis on you. You Molotov a door, they can't run through it because they take damage, it gets broken. Just fantastic. Zone control, just really nice stuff that if you're bringing it, you want to use it. Because there's a lot of times when players either won't use these items because they won't have them because they never use them, and they're just like, oh, I'm just never going to use it, so I should never keep it. Or they just, they have them on them and they don't use them because they forget. Same thing with like Francisca's or throwing knives for rogues. If you have them, you should use them. They are fantastic tools and they will do a lot for you. All right, moving on to skill usage. So this is something I think primarily with characters that have non-cooldown skills, for example, Fighter Second Wind, Ranger's Biscuits, that type of thing, they get worried about using it because like, oh, what if I use it here and then I need it later, right? And then they die, and it's like, okay, well, you didn't use it. You can't use it later because you're dead. So that's the thing is, I can't like tell you like, oh, you should always use them, when you go into a fight, or you should hold them for the perfect time, because at the end of the day, like there is a time to use them and there's a time not to use them. However, if you even think for a second you may need it, then it's worth it to use it, because it is better to use it and not need it than not use it and need it, right? Because if I use it and I win a fight that I was already going to win and it doesn't change anything, that's fine. I can put a campfire down and get it back. However, if I don't use it and then I end up dying, and if I had used it, it would have kept me alive, like I can't go back and be like, oh, oopsies, like, redo, I need to pop my second win there. It's just, that's over. Same thing for biscuits. I mean, I know you only have 3 charges of them, and sometimes it's easy to think, oh, I don't need to do this. I can just, drink a health pot, pop a bandage, and I'll be fine. But no, sometimes you just need that insta-healing, whether it be because you get hit when you didn't think you were going to, or whatever it may be. Sometimes it's just better to use those cooldowns. Biscuits, obviously, you can't get back with a campfire the same way you can, like, Second Wind. However, you do have 3 charges, so sometimes you just gotta bite the bullet and use them. Then, moving on to the next one, this is positioning. Like I said, this is something I've talked about a lot in another video. So, like I said, if you really want to know about that, then I recommend going to watch that video, but I will discuss this a bit. And really, what positioning just comes down to is knowing the area you're in and where your enemies are, and are you comfortable fighting there? If you're not, because this also ties back into what I've said about pick your fights. If you are not comfortable fighting in a position, then you should not fight there. Even if you're in a spot where, like, let's say, it's the final zone and you feel the need to push into them, but if I push in here, 90% of the chance I'm dead. Sometimes it's better to just avoid that fight and run around the zone looking for a portal. Or run around looking for statics. Statics are something that's very, very important to know the locations of. I've had many runs where my gear was saved because I knew where a static was and I couldn't get a portal. Either I couldn't get a portal, or my teammates were dead and there were people holding the zone off, so I couldn't go in to even look for one. This is mainly a crypts thing because obviously ruins have them, and Goblin Caves only has one, and if you get the map, everybody knows what that is pretty much. And generally speaking, that's always taken. But this is really, really good to know on crypts, because sometimes you can run half the map through the zone to get a static, because usually they won't be taken. Sure, sometimes they will, but not always. It's way less often that they're taken in crypts than they are for Goblin Caves. And like I said, other than that, just know when you're willing to fight. If you're not willing to take a fight, or you don't think the fight's good for you, don't take it. Try to reposition, look for a better angle. I think one of the best examples of this is when you fight Rangers. A lot of people are like, oh my god, Rangers are so OP, I can't do anything against them. And the reason they think that is because they're fighting Rangers in like long hallways. They're fighting them in really open spaces where the Ranger just freely shoot. You can't push the Ranger. However, there are a lot of situations in this game where that's avoidable. All you have to do is just, maybe you have to take a really long route around them, but it's better than just trying to run at them and dying. If you're a fighter, it's not that bad because obviously you can block and, arrows just don't do much damage to you if you're geared. However, for other classes, Rangers can, 2-3 shot them pretty consistently. So what you need to do is you need to move around the map in a way that you have terrain that can help you deal with Rangers or deal with range damage, It could be Ranger, it could be crossbow from a fighter, bard, it can be wizard spells. All of this range damage is stuff that you can avoid if you play around terrain correctly. And, that's, like I said, that is a very loose introduction to positioning. However, it covers the general idea. Moving on. Comfortability. This is something I don't think a lot of players are really aware of. And even now, I mean, I've played this game a ton. I have hundreds of hours on fighter and using certain weapons. And even me sometimes, I mess up with this. And that is knowing your weapon and your class. It is knowing your limits for what you can and can't do. And then beyond that, just physically knowing, the range of your weapon, the damage you do, that type of thing. Because sometimes, let's say I'm going to fight this barbarian. And I know I can kill him. I know that I will kill him before he kills me. That is something really useful to know because I know I can take the fight. However, if I don't know that and I go in thinking, "Wow, man, I really hope I'm able to beat this guy before he beats me," because so that's how it is for most people that aren't familiar with their damage or how tanky they are, how tanky the enemy is. And this literally just comes from playing the game. This is not something that you're going to build up overnight. This just comes from playing the game, getting used to using certain weapons. Because even now, there are a lot of weapons in this game I'm not comfortable on. If I pick up a longsword, I never use longsword. I'm not going to do that good with it. However, if I use a falchion or an arming sword, those are weapons I'm very experienced with, so I'm going to be able to perform with those weapons. Definitely way better than if I was using a longsword or even a spear or something that I don't use. And once again, this is something that I think it's nice, and this isn't really as much as a tip as it is just, I think, a matter of fact. It's eventually after playing the game a lot, you will get used to using your weapons. I'm just gonna fast forward this. I have this boring PvE stuff. There we go. And like I said, and you will get used to using weapons. And whenever you do, you will start winning more fights. That's just the thing. You learn your range, you learn your damage, you learn what you can and can't do. Just something that you'll learn playing the game. Then, on to the next thing is matchups. Once again, this works for everything. Solos, duos, trios. I think solos is the most important because in solos, matchups pretty much dictate 90% of a fight, I'd say. There are just some things you cannot fight no matter what. There are some things you will win no matter what you do. I think a great example of this is Warlock versus Fighter. Warlock is the hardest counter to Fighter in the game. Excuse me. And if they have even remotely okay gear, they can have green gear with magical healing, they will probably beat you no matter what your gear is. The only exception is if you're running in a super high movement speed kit where you're able to chase them down. But the chances you're running that compared to, and you're going to be able to outrun them is very, very slim. And then if you are running a kit like that, you have weaknesses to other things like rogues. However, knowing matchups, knowing who you can fight and who you can't fight is the number one thing that will keep you alive in this game. If you get to the situation of, oh, I can fight this guy, or oh, I cannot fight this guy, so you just don't even attempt it, I promise you, you will start winning 50% more fights or something like that. It's a really, really high number. And people don't realize how hard matchups actually control PvP in this game. Like I said, there are just some things, it's not even a skill thing. It's just how the game's PvP works. It is a rock paper scissors system. Rock will always beat scissors, unless something insane happens and we break the rules. It's always gonna happen. That's just how it works. Kind of unfortunate. That's just life, right? Oh, I'm actually. This is actually a side note. I was actually. I'm this. I actually need to skip this video right here because I'm gonna upload this later to YouTube. You guys can't watch that yet. Let me fast forward through, find something else. Where we at? There you go. Random Goblin Kids video. But sorry for that. Just I saw that and I realized I had to. I'm gonna upload that probably tomorrow. But matchups dictate so much, and it is very, very important that you learn what matchups are good and what are bad. And you know you can learn this by playing, you can learn this by watching YouTube videos, watching streams. Just like I said, for some, I will give a quick, like, little guide for fighter. Obviously, and this is gonna be like a more of like a 1v1 type thing, because in trios, obviously it's a bit different. For example, because Warlock's not even played in trios, and it's usually not as much of an issue because you have something that can deal with it, usually Ranger, Wizard, Barbarian, whatever it may be. But for Fighter, Warlock is your #1 counter. Something else that is very good against you is Wizard. However, Wizard is much more manageable because if you crossbow them, you can slowly wear them down and force them to heal, and it takes them a long time to heal because, they're low agility and that type of thing, that type of stuff, low agility, resourcefulness, all that. So as long as they don't insta-kill you on the engage and you can hit your crossbow shots, you can usually wear them down. Other than that, right now, Rogue is probably actually, not probably. Rogue is absolutely the best character in the game, and a geared Rogue will 3-tap you. That's just... If you've watched my recent video of that hell fight, you saw me die to a Rogue in like 3 swings from like 80% HP. I was incredibly geared. Rogues are just at that point right now where they are beyond broken. But other than that, Smite Clerics are something else that are very, very good. If you can't kite out the Smite and you have to fight them with it, you're going to lose most of the time because they do a ton of damage to you. However, if you can kite out the Smite, it's definitely winnable. Barbarian is a pretty even matchup. I'd say it's probably like 60-40 fighter favored. It's not, and usually it comes down to skill. If you're better than the Barbarian player and you can get good blocks off, you can beat them. However, if you can't, then there's a good chance they'll be able to beat you. Rangers, obviously fighter favored. Fighter dominates Rangers, same with Bard. Pretty much any physical class, Fighter should have an advantage over. It's not always the case, but that's kind of what your character's built around. And other than that, not a whole lot to say. I mean, generally speaking, like, the best way I can give you advice on is if they are physical damage, you usually will have the advantage over them, and you will have a better matchup to them. If they're magic damage, then probably not. That's just the best way to go about it, right? Then another thing is knowing your gear and knowing the enemy's gear. And obviously, just at a glance, you can't always look at somebody and see like, hey, they're way more geared than me, I shouldn't fight them. But there are certain things you can look for that tell you whether or not, you should be fighting someone. For example, this comes down to matchups again, honestly, a bit, but it's certain weapons. Certain weapons you do not want to be fighting unless you have what is good for it. For example, let's say you see a fighter with a halberd, right? And you're using, I'm trying to think of something good. Like, let's say you're a Slayer fighter, right? And you see a fighter with a halberd. That is not a fight you want to take because they're going to 2-tap you 90% of the time before you even get in range to swing at them. And that's what halberd does. That's also halberd's really good against barbarians for that reason. It's because they can't block it. You do really high damage, and they have to get close to you to hurt you. So that is something very, very important to know, is when you look at their gear, think, can I beat them in a fight? And obviously, it's going to take time learning it, but whenever you do, you look at that and be like, can I beat them? Yes. Okay, I can fight them. No. Okay, I can't fight them, or I have to do something different to fight them. Because just because you can't beat someone straight up doesn't mean you can't fight them. It just means you have to fight them in a different way than you were normally going to. Like, there are a lot, like, for example, like a Ranger. I can W key a Ranger and kill him 90% of the time. However, if it's a Wizard, it's something that's really strong against me, it doesn't mean I can't beat him. It just means I have to play differently around him. And that's what the same thing when it comes to gear. Just because you see someone, like, let's say you inspected them in the pregame lobby, and they're really good gear's way better than yours, doesn't mean you can't beat them. It just means the way you have to beat them is different than if you outgeared them. Just, they might be able to just run at you and W key you and not care about a thing in the world. However, for you, you have to jump through all these hoops, but if you do, you can beat them, which is something that's very, very important to pay attention to. Because sometimes, you're going to be able to kill these geared players and get a giant come up. It's fantastic. And then other than that, I think, honestly, these haven't even been tips, really. I mean, some of them have been, but other than the things I've mentioned, if you want to get better at PvP in this game, it's going to be the exact same as every other game. It's just time. Like, sure, everybody started off bad. I started off bad. All your favorite players started off bad. Repose, Jay, Ken, all of those players, when they first started playing this game, they were not good at PvP. Nobody was. It's just how it happens. There's a learning curve to the game. This one is not as steep as others, but there is still a learning curve. And when you add in things like gear and all these matchups, it does become a bit harder to, like, to start winning consistent fights and start extracting. However, if you play the game more and you're just experiencing it for yourself, you will get better. Just how it works. The game is not super hard, so long as you put the time in, you will see the results. And if you keep some of these things in mind that I mentioned, I think it definitely will help you speed it up and you will get better a bit faster. But with that being said, this pretty much sums it up for the video. I don't really have too much else to talk about. Like I said, if there are some things like positioning that I mentioned that you want to hear more in depth on, just go check out my other video. Maybe I'll link it in the description. Probably won't. I can do it. Sure, I'll do it. But other than that, thank you guys for watching. And if you have any opinions or thoughts that you'd like to leave, just feel free to do it down below. I will reply to them as the best I can, which is pretty good usually. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.